Hi, and welcome to The Expansive Journey. My name is Julie, and today's topic is going to be relationships during a spiritual awakening. So when we wake up, we tend to become more aware, right? And we sort of become aware of the energetics between ourselves and others. And we sort of become aware of the separation that has always sort of been there, under the surface. And when it used to feel normal, what used to feel normal does now feel sort of uncomfortable because we feel that separation in a much deeper way. And all the emotions that have been sort of suppressed, they are sort of coming to the surface, and we can't really deny the pain that we feel anymore. And trying to deny that only usually makes us suffer more. So we sort of need to see what has already been there, right? And this is usually very triggered by other people. And we can notice that because we might feel an increased sense of anxiety around other people. I remember when this happened to me, I felt so aware of the energies between the energetics between the interactions with other people, and it felt so intense. It was like it was turned up, so it was overwhelming in a way, you know. And I could feel like my old sense of insecurities and shame and all of that sort of coming to the surface. And this is something that most of us never want to talk about because it's so much shame around shame, right? And most humans have a sense of shame that comes from childhood because we were told that we were not good enough in some area of life, or we just have this deep sense of shame around our identity in some level. And this is something that might be deep under the surface, that might haven't ever been even recognized after you were like a teenager almost, but it might sort of start to come up to the surface and we start to feel it, right? And other feelings we might feel is guilt, we might feel anger towards other people, we might feel irritated, and we might also feel a sense of loneliness even with other people. And all of this is really hard to admit, right? And especially to ourselves, because we have sort of made identities and mental constructs that sort of make us avoid these feelings. And we might also feel that other people are not what we thought they were, or we might see their behavior more clearly and how it's affecting us more clearly. And we might also see how our behavior affects other people more clearly, right? Because we become more aware of the emotional energetics or the energetic interactions between ourselves and others. And many of us on our spiritual journey will encounter situations with others that feel sort of conflict. We might encounter conflicts. And that's because the universe is showing us, or true selves is showing us what we need to see to heal, right? And either that's through a thought process, like a mental process, or if we're not willing to look at it by ourselves, it will show up in our external life in some way or another. So if, for example, you're afraid of being abandoned, then you might experience that you're being abandoned, right? And this will start to show up as we start on this journey. I don't know about you guys, but for me, it was really life before and after spiritual awakening. And life is very different when you become more conscious of things and how the dynamic between humans work. You can't necessarily logically explain it, but you can feel it very strongly. And one thing to remember here, or to sort of like to think about that can make this easier, is that to know that other people's behavior belong to them and it's completely outside of your control. And so are other people's words and actions, and also their opinions of you. Just like your opinions and words and actions are a reflection of you. So other people's behavior belongs to them, but your reaction, emotional reaction, belong to you. And it's up to you to integrate and become aware of. And when we are waking up and becoming more conscious of our behavior and thought patterns and beliefs and how we sort of have unconsciously coped with life, we will encounter sort of like, at least that's my perspective, we will encounter sort of like three main groups of people. And the first group of people are those who are going through the same. right? They are, in one way or another, they are becoming more aware of themselves, either through like they are going through the path of like the Zen path of no self, or if they are more on a personal development path. But they are both aware of themselves, and they are trying to become more conscious of their own behavior. And they are usually kind of supportive of your path as well, even though it might differ a little bit. And the second group of people, we categorize it this way, is the people who are very supportive or try to understand, but are not really on the same path. They are living their life as normal, and they're happy as a normal human being in this world. And they're not experiencing an awakening, but they're supportive of you, like do your thing. It might be like a stronger sense of sovereignty there, a stronger sense of individuality and independence. So they let you be you, and you also let them be them, right? And I think that's a really healthy connection, even though you are on different paths. The last group of people are those that are sort of a little bit opposed to what you are going through. They might notice the difference in you, and they might also be triggered by your stronger conscious awareness. You are being triggered by your own conscious awareness because you become more aware of your own pain. And other people can also feel that within them. And then they might project their own pain onto you and give you the blame because they are threatened, or they feel triggered by your light, right? And this is something that they necessarily don't know that's going on. They don't understand this is what's happening because they're very mind identified, and they're still blaming others very like heavily. And in that kind of case, we might end up in conflicts with people that we have maybe known our whole lives or have a very strong emotional connection to. And in my case, I felt like I had to rearrange my social circle a little bit. And some people, most of my people at that point, they were not really going through a spiritual awakening, and but didn't really, and I didn't really include them in that process. But they were completely supportive of me doing something else and changing my way of thinking and my way of being. That was completely fine for them. And then there were the people that sort of had a very negative reaction to it. They saw the changes in me, and they saw that my energy was sort of pulled away from them and more maybe towards myself. And for me, that was very empowering and it felt good, but they sort of didn't like it. They had a negative reaction to it. And in that kind of situation, if someone is sort of mistreating you, and you can sense that this behavior is actually not something that I want in my life. These kinds of relationships or energetic dynamics is not something that is for me anymore. It's not a match to who I am now, right? Maybe it used to be, but now I've changed so much that I need people that are aligned with that and that are supportive of that, right? Either that they are consciously supportive or unconsciously supportive, that they don't oppose it. So your true nature is free. You have absolute freedom to choose what you want and who you want in your life, right? So I recommend that you choose wisely and keep boundaries to those that do not treat you the way you want to be treated, right? This is obvious, but sometimes we can be very, very tied emotionally to someone, and it's really hard to let go. Remember that it's really okay to say no and set boundaries while you are going through something that is probably the most vulnerable and raw that a human can experience, that is awakening. You are absolutely allowed to stop doing what everyone else wants, and you can start doing what feels natural to you, right? And if you don't do that, you will feel a resentment to them. And in my case, at least, if I don't sort of follow what feels intuitively right for me because of someone or something, maybe cultural conditions and stuff like that, then I feel a strong resentment, right? If someone tries to take away your freedom or your authentic self, you will feel a strong resentment towards that person, right? So you're absolutely okay to say no and to keep people on a distance if it feels sort of friction there. But always, always take a look at yourself and see, what is being triggered within me, right? What is being triggered within me? Because other people are actually the best mirror for you to start seeing yourself, because this is usually where the triggers arise, right? When you are alone in nature or somewhere else, when there are no one else there, you will probably not feel so triggered as you do around other people. And this is why being out in the world with other people is a huge spiritual practice, actually. How much of your peace can you keep around others? And this is where the real work begins. And I recommend that you go easy on yourself and take the time you need to be alone and be selective in the people that you allow yourself to have emotional connections to, because it does matter for your own well-being. And if you have the freedom to choose, why would you choose someone that doesn't treat you with the love and respect that you deserve? So what happens with this greater consciousness that is sort of starting to emerge within us is that we feel a stronger sensitivity. And that stronger sensitivity sort of shines on all the layers of inauthenticity. And it gets harder and harder for us to sort of fake it and to be inauthentic. It gets harder and harder to just put it all together and just be a people pleaser and do what everyone else wants on the expense of ourselves. It's going to become really uncomfortable the more you become aware of those patterns, right? And how that makes you feel more than anything. And even though it's been the norm for humanity to sort of find this the sense of safety and love and joy in other people and objects, as these shifts occur, this huge shift in consciousness, we start to seek these things within, because that is actually where they naturally occur, right? Because our true nature is free, it's safe, and it's joyful, and it's peaceful, and it's absolutely love, it's oneness, right? So we start to seek these things within more and more. And we need to sort of be anchored within ourselves, external seeking these things in other things and people. It doesn't mean that we can't enjoy it, but it's not a source of our joy. And that's where true sovereignty come in. And remember that you're supposed to be you, and you are not supposed to try to be something else or someone else, or experience something other than what you are experiencing in this moment to make someone else happy, right? Because the universe, it expresses itself as you, and it wants to experience itself as you, exactly as you are. And when you realize this, you stop pushing away your emotions and your thought patterns, and you start to treat it with compassion, because you start to see that it's just an expression of unconsciousness. And we have been for many thousands of years, we've been in an emotional dark age, and people have not really been aware of their own behavior and their own sort of unconscious patterns. People have not been feeling their emotions and even understanding what emotion is for a really, really long time. So this is generational, and it's deep wounds here that we are healing and clearing. So know that people are doing their best. They're really doing their best from where they're at. And if we think about it, when we were more unconscious, we were probably doing and saying and behaving in ways that were probably not the best either from time to time, right? And it's not a matter of sort of feeling guilt around it. And it's a matter of learning compassion, right? Can we have compassion for ourselves and others when they are unconscious? Because it's just the mind identification that is causing this friction between people and this sense of separation between us as well. So when we become more sensitive and we start to feel into the human world, the human interactions, and what it actually means to be a human, we might start to recognize that most humans are sort of living life in a very superficial way, and that they distract themselves and they seek pleasure, try to avoid pain, they create identities to sort of like avoid their own suffering. And very few people are, and unless they're on this journey, they are willing to actually acknowledge what they feel and be authentic with themselves. And we start to feel that this inauthenticity, we start to feel this fakeness, we start to feel that, you might even feel more peaceful alone than what you do around other people. And you might feel that other people are not in this process a source to your happiness or your joy, because it's so much wounds and so much unconscious patterns that come to the surface. And when we start to heal that, emotional connections will just be better and better and better. But in the process and in the initial stages of awakening, it can be really challenging. So most people use identities, put on an identity, like a mask, a fake mask, and they use humor and social status to sort of like hide their own shame and loneliness and pain. And that's just how the human condition is, and that's how people are coping with their pain. And awakening is to become aware of that and start to live from an authentic place, start to live in truth. First and foremost, to yourself, right? So some fundamental principles that I like to bring into every relationship that I create, no matter what kind of relationship it is, it has to be sort of implemented. It has to follow these. It has to be in alignment with these frequencies or energies, you can say. And I try to consciously bring them in, and also make sure that every relationship that I emotionally invite into my life are in alignment with those to the best of my ability, as much as possible. And the first one is love. You can't have a relationship without love. And that also goes for compassion and empathy. It has to be a sense of love there. The second one is sovereignty and independence and freedom. So you are allowed to be your own person and go through your own life and do what's right for you. And the other person gets to do that as well. So it's a teamwork, but it's also freedom within that teamwork. And the third one is always authenticity, realness, being real, and speaking truth. That also means that when you mean no, you mean no. And you can say no with compassion. Authenticity with compassion. Independence and sovereignty with love. Some of these things might sound contradictory, but in a healthy relationship, it's actually not a problem, because both people will probably want to live in these energies as well. It's okay to love people on a distance if you feel like their emotional baggage is very strongly felt by you. It's very important that you communicate boundaries and say no. And if you don't do that, again, you will feel probably a sense of resistance towards the other person. After a while, you might feel more this intuitively natural, like gravitation away from people that is affecting you very negatively, or you feel like they're coming from a place or an intention that is not love, or they feel like they are friends with you to get something from you, right? It's not unconditional. It feels very limiting in a sense. So lastly, I just want to say that you should always trust yourself. You know what's right for you. Don't use boundaries to bypass your own emotional baggage, because that's a process. Your triggers are yours to see, and my triggers are mine to see, and that's the journey. And how do we see and how do we release our triggers? That is by feeling them without resistance, accepting them, and having compassion for ourselves. And if you want to learn more about that and learn how to release emotions and understand your emotions and how to navigate that landscape when you start to become more sensitive, then I invite you to check out my program, Awaken You. There's a whole module there on emotion and emotional release, because that's been a huge challenge for me in my own journey. And I've definitely found my techniques that I would love to share with you. So if that sounds interesting, then you can book a call with me in the link in the bio. And if you want to get a foretaste of Awaken You, the program, then I recommend that you check out my free masterclass that I posted also in the link in the description below. If you're on YouTube, if you're on Instagram, all of these links are in the bio. In that masterclass, I talk about one of the most fundamental aspects of a spiritual awakening and conscious evolution. And that is the topic of attention and focus. And if that sounds interesting to you, then I recommend that you check it out. And as always, like this video and subscribe to my channel. And also let me know in the comments below how this resonates with you, if you found some value from it, and if you have some other realizations that you might have had on your own spiritual journey when it comes to relationships. And until next time, much love and namaste.